So, all right. So here we are. Elio Longoria, welcome to the show.
Morning or afternoon.
Yeah, afternoon. Thank you so much. Well, listen, I'm so glad that we connected. I don't remember exactly how it transpired. Maybe it was through Facebook or an email, but you told me that you were a past student, and then you started telling me your story, and I had to jump on the phone with you. So we got on the phone. This was a couple of weeks ago, and you started telling me a little bit about your journey, and you're really just a brand new startup. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Cool. So tell me, what attracted you to the freight brokerage industry? Because you were working in corporate America, right? Can you kind of tell us how that whole thing evolved?
Yeah. So I've been in corporate America for about 15, 16 years now, and primarily always, business management, sales primarily. It's sales focused. And about, I want to say 8 months ago, June of last year, a buddy of mine got intrigued by the trucking industry. And, that kind of really planted the seed for me, and him and I actually are trained sparring partners in jiu-jitsu, and we have a real close relationship, and I respect the hell out of him, but he's got that entrepreneur spirit. He wanted to kind of take that leap. And so he came across a person in the fall of last year and basically sold him a dream, how great trucking would be and this and that. And, come to find out, it intrigued me. And I said, listen, I can't jump in with you, but I'll definitely consult on the sidelines and do the best that I can. So I just, what ended up happening, one thing led to another, and nights and weekends turned into YouTube videos, of people like yourself and others, and just kind of learning more, buying books about the logistics industry in general. And then at the end of last year, I thought that evolved into, hey, you know what? I'm not going to be a trucker or own trucks, but what I'll do, I'll start a dispatching company. And I thought that's what I wanted to do. Until one day in November, I had a conversation with a buddy of mine, and I told him what I was thinking about. He goes, you know what? He goes, well, you probably didn't know this, but we pay brokers like a crazy amount of money to move freight for us. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, yeah. And in my head, I'm thinking, well, listen, I don't think he get it, because I told him I wanted a dispatch, not broker. To me, broker seemed like an overwhelming, far-fetched, idea that I didn't think I had the capabilities to do. And he goes, yeah, dude. He goes, he gave me an amount. He goes, we pay this to send it from here to New York. I'm like, interesting. So I hauled ass back to the house, and I made a phone call, and I called a few truckers, and I asked them, hey, what's this normally go for? And when I heard the amount, I'm thinking, I identified the gap. I'm like, there's something here. And long story short, January 1, after pondering the idea on January 1, the first thing I did that Friday morning was go to the FMCSA website. I dropped $300 and I applied for my license, and then the paperwork started from there. I looked at the calendar, and I gave myself 6 weeks to put a plan together and work backwards from that date.
And what's really interesting is you were still working in corporate America full time when you kind of identified the gap. You went and filed for your authority, all of that, right? You were still working full time in corporate America.
Right. Yeah. And it's not a 40-hour week program. Unfortunately, it's early morning sales meetings, late night promotions sometimes. And then it's, with Zoom calls and working out in the field. And then unfortunately, my wife and I both got COVID. So we had 2 little kids to manage at the same time, and God blessed us, and they didn't get COVID. So we all made it out okay, and everything was
Thank
cool.
God.
So, it just, to be honest with you, that was another reason why I thought, hey, look, this is a sign. You don't want to be in your deathbed looking back one day thinking, damn, I never gave myself a shot. I never believed in myself. So it's like, let's rock and roll.
Love it. So you went through the process. So you enrolled in Freight Broker Bootcamp, correct?
I did, Dennis. I think I did it right after I applied for the FMCSA license. And I said, I'm gonna need some training. So I did that along with some Amazon books that I found online, and I found your course to be pretty helpful. Yeah. The resources that you provided were pretty kind of cut and dry. The articles, I think you referenced in one of your videos. That's when I became really hooked on your videos, and started taking certain nuggets and tidbits and trying to piece it all together. And I used that to develop a plan. In fact, you and I actually interacted a lot through your YouTube videos. And I was kind of telling you, what, this is spot on. This is exactly what we use today to build annual business plans. It's real basic. It's not complicated stuff. So I actually went ahead and printed the articles that you provided for us. And I knew I wasn't going to always have access to the computer. So as I'm driving around, any spare minute I had, I would pop that article thing open and start reading it. It turned into reading time with my kids, where they read their books, and then I was reading, the Freight Broker Bootcamp article directory.
I love it. Perfect. Yeah, and the thing about it is this. What I love about it is that you took the initiative and you took a little bit of risk, a calculated risk, about going out and applying for your authority even before you bought the training. I mean, the reality is, guys, I'm going to be very honest with you. To apply for your freight broker authority is just not that complicated, right? If you go to the FMCSA freight broker, registration page, it literally will walk you through it. I mean, there's some forms and a little bit of lingo you'll have to understand, but there's nothing that you can't learn there to apply for your authority. So I get this question all the time from people. They're like, well, after this, after I take Freight Broker Bootcamp, will I have my authority? No, we teach you how to get your authority, but that's a very small percentage of what the course is about. The course is more about, starting with, a little bit of education and lingo and terminology and understanding the basics of the market, then your authority. And then it's kind of launching the program more, setting up your home office and understanding the fundamentals of rating and how freight moves and some of the sales and customer acquisition stuff. So, I mean, that's where the course is really more valuable, right, than just the actual setting up your authority. We don't do, authority, we don't do done for you authority processing. I mean, because you don't need it. I mean, the fact is you really don't need it. There's people out there you can pay to do it, but I'm not going to be one of those guys, right? I teach you, I don't feed you, right? It's that type of deal. So you went forward, you applied for your authority, you went through some of the Freight Broker Bootcamp training, and then tell us what happened next. Tell us a little bit of that journey. You should be able to summarize that fairly quickly because you're literally you started operations, the beginning of March?
Yes, March 1. The initial plan, my 6-week plan, was to kick things off part-time, nights and weekends and after work. And obviously, my wife and I had a pretty decent regimen with working out early in the morning. So that, for me, that kind of skipped out, and that turned into from working out to working on this. And so February 15th, that's when we're going to look to kick things off and start cold calling and set an email blast and LinkedIn and kind of more or less hide behind the logo, right? I didn't want to expose myself totally yet. And that was the week of the big storm, freeze in Texas. So everybody was at a halt and nothing was happening. So then I gave myself a goal of landing at least one customer in the first 2 weeks of February. It didn't pan out. I landed my first customer on February 26th on a Friday afternoon after I just finished cold calling them earlier that week. And it's turns, I followed up with them. And I gave them some quotes, and I won't forget, it was like on a Thursday night. I sent out some quotes and I was nervous as hell. I'm like, what am I doing with quotes? I don't know what the hell to quote, but I did my due diligence. I went online. I called a couple of, carriers. And I got some feedback. I said, you know what? I'm just going to take my shot here, because if I don't, then I'll never know if I came close or not. So I shot it. He comes back Friday, goes, hey, listen, we're, granted this project and we need help with trucks. So at the moment, I probably should have said, hey, we need to get this to a more experienced freight broker. And I did the complete opposite. I said, you know what, we're on it. And so we didn't sleep that entire weekend. We worked all day, Saturday and Sunday. I didn't have much luck by Friday afternoon. So as I'm driving to my kids' basketball practice, I had to call the shipper and ask for an increase on the truck payout. And he got it approved within 45 minutes. So then Saturday night, Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, that's exactly what we did, is we booked all the trucks necessary for that project on Monday. And I even went out and got my own PPE at Home Depot on Sunday. And I've never owned boots in my life. I got boots and a hard hat. And I actually drove to the site at 4 a.m. just to kind of see if my trucks were going to get there on time. And when I got there, they're like, the guys were like, who the hell are you? And what are you doing? I'm like, I'm with Interfire Logistics. I'm a freight broker. Oh, you're the guy with the trucks. Like, yeah, come on through. Like, okay, sounds good. Because we're going to have a quick sales meeting. Basically, it's just a bunch of us screaming at each other. So just bear with us for about 30 minutes and then we'll get going. And sure enough, our trucks started showing up and I was just kind of waving at them. They didn't know who the hell I was, but they're like, who's this guy waving at me? And
I love that.
I got a lot of like, hey, we've never had freight brokers come out to the job sites. I'm like, you know what? It's a new client. It's a new project. So I just want to make sure things are kind of going the way they need to go. So it was neat. It was an experience.
And so what were the results of that? So you hustled, you covered a bunch of loads, the truck started coming in, And this was basically like a project, right? You would kind of bid on X number of trucks for a certain project that this client was doing. What was the end result? We'll dig into some of the middle parts, but what was the end result of that first client in that first week of actually moving freight?
75 shipments and $46,000 in sales.
And that resulted in about how much in profit? A little over 7,000?
Correct.
So $46,000 in revenue, $7,000 in profit. Now, when we say profit, guys, for those of you that are new, we're talking about gross margin, the difference between what you're charging the shipper and what you're paying the truck. And you understand Elio's a startup, so his overhead is very, very low. He's got a couple load boards. He maybe has a little bit of software. Maybe he bought a computer or phone, something like that. His overhead is very, very low. So that $7,000 is literally profit to help him, continue to get more clients and develop his business out. And so, yeah, I mean, that happened so quickly. So tell me, so you were cold calling. You started out, I mean, you had first kind of got the idea through a friend who said that they pay brokers. What happened there? Is there a relationship there where you're going to be able to do business with them, or do they require you to be in business a certain amount of time, or was there just too much of a process to start doing business with him? Where did that go?
So actually, we just had a follow-up conversation, because since then, what I didn't want to do is come to him with zero experience and potentially make an error or mistake. So I said, you know what, I already have that there. Let me come back to that once I get some experience on my own and go through some headache, right? Go through some scary situations. That way I'll know how to address and face them once I do, work with him. Now, he works for a pretty big company in the US, and it's almost like you go buy an expensive steak. You don't want to buy that expensive steak at the market and not know how to cook it, right? You want to make sure you do it right. So we have some things that are going to be working out between him and our company starting next week. But for now, I'm cold calling still. My wife and I are both on the phone, and I'm actually driving out, and I route myself per day. Part of our cadence is first thing in the mornings as we read, at least 15 minutes on industry news. We look at the rates. And the Friday prior, we do a weekly pre-plan for the day. So we kind of know exactly who we're going to call and what the plan is for that given day. And then I think you mentioned it in one of your videos, Dennis, a while back. I don't know which one it was, but you said one of the worst things that sales reps are good at or bad at is follow-up. They suck at follow-up. So I told her that, and I don't know if I got it from your video somewhere else, but the percentage rate of return from a buyer on the follow-up increases substantially after the third time or the third contact. So now we've given ourselves a goal that we're going to follow up with every cold call at least 5 times, right? Let it be through email, through the phone, or in live, but we're going to at least make, 5 contacts. And after the 5th contact, then we'll spread it out more and just, put it in our calendars, to kind of touch on them again. But other than that, we're just kind of moving on. And we decided to take on a different approach too. We're not trying to contact, 50 shippers in one day, because you kind of tend to go a little shallow, right? So we do take our time and we study the client, a few minutes, not too much. I'm talking about 15, 20 minutes on their website about us, and then do a quick research, find out anything about the company that we can. Who do they deal with? Who supplies them their raw ingredients? Who do they ship to? What are their rankings? Who do they compete against? So just basic information before we make that phone call. That way we have some knowledge about their industry and their business.
Yeah, I love that. So I call that sales intelligence. And I think it's really important, that step that you're taking, because a lot of brokers, a lot of salespeople in general, whether you're in the logistics industry or not, they don't do that upfront research. And as you get better at it, it won't take you 15 minutes. You'll be able to recognize some common patterns, particularly. And you'll also, as you start digging into a specific niche, you'll start seeing these things repeating, and it'll just become second nature to you. But gathering that sales intelligence is extremely powerful, because what it does is it totally differentiates your conversation from the conversation of everybody else, most of everybody else that's cold calling. Because when they cold call up, they're basically cold calling and begging for freight. That's what most freight brokers do. And that's the reason why you don't need to be a rocket scientist. You don't need to be some smooth talking salesperson. You don't need to have a ton of experience in order to get shippers and get customers in this industry. But what you do need to do is you do need to be a little bit different. Right. And so I don't know if you heard me say it before, but I've said it hundreds of times, and, over the next several years, you'll hear it 100 more times. Different is better than better. everybody plays the better game. Well, we're going to get better rates and we're going to have better customer service and we're going to have better technology. That's all great. And I think that's all important. And I love that. But it's not different than anybody else because everybody says they have good customer service and everybody says they have good communications and everybody says they have good technology. So you're not different. You're just like everybody else. But your differentiation can be how you approach your prospect, right? A cold call that sounds like a cold call is one of the most difficult ways to be different. But if you were to use some sort of sales intelligence about maybe an industry topic that's very relevant at this given point, and you start using that as your conversation piece when you start talking to prospects, or they just got featured in some sort of an article, or you have some quote from their vice president or CEO, or they just acquired a new company, or there's new industry legislation that you can start a conversation about. What that does is that shows that you're educated, right? That shows the prospect that you're educated. And typically buyers want to do business with educated providers. And statistically speaking, what happens is it's not always the best salesperson that gets the deal. It's typically the most educated. And I don't mean college education, right? That's all great and well. What I mean is about educated about their niche, educated about the buyer, educated about the industry, educated about the challenges, and educated in that realm. So that's what I mean by educated. Don't take that wrong. I've seen plenty of people that barely graduated high school that have been successful in this business, which is fine. It's not truly indicative of your background or your education as to whether you can be successful. So I love that. One thing I want to dive into really quick, because I don't want to lose track of this. And that is, you made the conscious decision to pull the trigger with that prospect because you felt like you had done enough due diligence, right? And I think that's where a lot of people that are new to the industry struggle. They have a real hard time with taking any sort of calculated risks. They're very scared to fail. And I get it. I totally get it. You don't want to have egg on your face, but here's what I'm going to tell you. You will never steal second with your foot on first, right? It's just not going to happen. You're going to get picked off every single time. Could you talk a little bit about that process and how you felt and maybe, some of the butterflies in your stomach and then how, and why you did it? Just expand on that a little bit, because I think that's probably one of the most real situations that everybody is going to feel as a new broker or new agent.
Right. The initial feeling or emotion was fear, and I've had to battle with fear in the past, and I've always felt that it's just crippled me. And it's just not, seems like it's not just me, it's a lot of people, right, that go through this venture. But I just kind of made a commitment. I've had I surround myself by, good people, and I have a good support group of friends and family. And, when your colleagues at work saying, hey, they believe in you and you're this, you're that, it's almost like, well, what's stopping me? Like, I need to believe in myself. Right. So I was just done with it. I wasn't going to allow fear to get in the way of my dreams. And I just felt that there's no passion in betting small. So we had to go big, and that's why I said yes. That's why I said, what, we got this. So then I kind of put myself against the corner, put my back against the corner. So let's fight from here. And we're going to make it happen no matter what. So at this point, my name was on it. My company name was on the line, and I wanted to protect that as much as possible. And I wasn't going to let anything go down. And I wanted to make sure that this customer who believed in me and gave me a chance, I didn't want to fail them. I wanted to do everything to ensure that their project was successful and that they looked back and thought, you know what? It's not how much I paid this guy. It's really the service and the level of quality work that he provided, in terms of communication and everything else. So here's my chance. Like, I didn't think I was going to get an opportunity to do this. So I had to take it right then and there. The most difficult part was obviously the before work and after work, and fielding phone calls during work. That was a challenge, right? And that's when my wife and I had a conversation, said, look, it's not realistic at this point for me, at least for me as an individual, to do this while I have a full-time job, because things come up and you have to be ready to address them, even if you have zero experience. So all hands on deck.
And so you decided at that point to do what? After you made that realization, you said, hey, listen, I can't do this while having a full-time job, which led to?
Yeah, so it led to ultimately pulling the plug, and I'm no longer employed at my company anymore, and we're launching full time. So realistically, last week was my first full-time week. We're cold calling every day, and we're promoting a referral program. And I mean, we have a cadence now. It's a daily cadence, and we have set goals. And we're giving ourselves 4 to 5 months to get this thing right.
Yeah. So just follow the timeline, guys. He kind of stumbled across the idea in the fall. He pulled the trigger in January to go out and just apply for his license. It took a month or so to get that process going. He got it live. He started, doing some serious due diligence. He made some phone calls. He came across an opportunity with a cold call prospect that he had made. He decided to go all in on that opportunity. That project went extremely well. He generated over $7,000 in profit. And shortly after that, he resigned from his job. He's now working his business full-time with his wife. So I want you to understand that this you can have it all. You just can't have it all at once. Right. So I loved it. He took a very phased approach, to doing this. He's got a family. He's got responsibilities, he's got bills, just like everybody else that's watching this. And so he took some calculated risks, but he went out there and he was willing to staple his name on that opportunity. And that was the leverage he needed to say, listen, I got to pot commit to this thing. And if I don't do it, then it's not going to work anyway. So there's no risk without reward. And to the victor goes the spoils. The fact is, everything probably didn't go according to Hoyle. And he probably made some mistakes. And there was probably some issues that came along the way. But that's okay. You'll figure those out, right? You'll figure those out. There's an old adage, and it goes like this. If you wait for all the lights to turn green before you head to work in the morning, you're always going to be late. Okay. That's just the way it's going to be. So, I have an amazing amount of respect for what Elio did. He took some risks, and here he is, kind of basically, living his dream, which was, for him not to necessarily be stuck in corporate America, although he probably had a great job. It sounds like, it was a good company and he was making a good living. But now he's taken that leap. Him and his wife are off to the races. So I'm super excited. Is there anything else that you want to add of, maybe lessons learned or just anything to try to help the audience? And then we're going to jump into some live Q&A here in a minute.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I know I think I heard you say this, Dennis, not too long ago, last week sometime. There's less freight brokers today than what there were 3 or 5 years ago. But it's still a lot though. Over 17,000 licensed freight brokers. If you're getting started out and you're interested in this, it does take a lot of time, and it takes a lot of dedication, takes a lot of hard work, and you really have to do your homework in advance. Show up prepared to any conversation. Let it be a call with the truck driver, a call with the potential shipper. Definitely due diligence is a big piece of what this is. It's what I'm learning so far. And take advantage of the resources you have here with Dennis Brown. I took a lot from a Friday night Zoom call that we did with Yogi. Yogi decided to host one night, and to this day, it's part of our pitch. It's part of my pitch. When he asked, "Hey, why don't you rate the current freight brokers that you deal with?" And I used it last week, and it worked in our favor. You're an independent freight broker, right? So you're up against these big conglomerates that make a lot of money and have the latest technology and they make things very turnkey. So when the lady told me what Dennis just said now, she said, "Hey, listen, you're telling me you're reliable, that you do this, you do that." That's what every freight broker tells me. How are you different? I'm like, let me ask you, how many freight brokers do you deal with? Like, well, I deal with 5 right now. Okay, if you were to combine them all together, how would you rate and grade from 1 to 10 those freight brokers? Because I'd give them about 7. They're pretty good. Okay, 7. So at best, they're C+. How would you rate your client base? Are you dealing with C+ client base or A or B+? No, they're all A, right? There's a gap. Allow me to fill that gap. Give me an opportunity to earn your business, right? So most of the big conglomerates you deal with, you just mentioned earlier that you just have a hard time getting a hold of them. They're probably employees. I'm not an employee. I'm an independent freight broker. We work before 8 a.m. We work after 6 p.m. So you'll have around the clock service for the most part when you deal with us. And she goes, okay. She kind of smiled and laughed, and she goes, okay, we'll start with a few loads and we'll see how that goes and we'll go from there. So it's every situation's do or die, because again, I have a wife, I have kids, I have a lab, we got to feed, we got to pay mortgage, so it's, you put yourself in a situation and you find out that you're a different individual, because now it's on you. You got to make it happen, and as you go out there and you're building your websites for your company and you're sharing this information, make sure you don't put any content on your website that you can't hold yourself accountable to, right? So use that as an integrity check. Don't say stuff just to say it, because I guarantee you're going to come across a shipper who's going to say, you know what? Well, you mentioned this on your website, and now you're not being able to hold up your part of the bargain. So I cautious that a little bit, because I see a lot of freight brokers out there in their websites, and it's interesting. But most importantly, network as much as you can. Network up front. One of the things that I still hold true to this day, and I will, is when Dennis referenced niches, right? There's riches and niches. So I decided to go through flatbed, primarily because I'm in Southeast Texas, right? So we're the capital of energy, and there's oil gas companies all over the place. And I felt that's kind of an area where I want to focus in. By default, I landed on steel pipe, right? So guess what? This week I'm going to work on farm equipment a little bit, just to kind of still stay within flatbed, but eventually I'd like to hone into a specific commodity and go from there. We've had our hands in a little bit of everything. We haven't just done steel pipe. We've also done like big bulldozers that weigh over 50,000 pounds, and that's been very interesting as well. So we have the options, but our focus is flatbed freight, 100%, right? 2% being hot shot, but 90% being flatbed or step deck freight, and that's what we're going to stick to. In my previous experience, we did a lot of dry van with work, you're right. But in my dad's even asked me, why don't you just do dry van? That's what you know. I'm like, that's the easy thing. I want to go and learn something new and see what we can do, and then maybe fall back to that one day. I think, Dennis, when you started your business, if I'm not mistaken, you were very specific on either outbound, inbound lanes, and I think it was either dry van or reefer trucks. But you didn't, and I remember you said you had an agent who said, hey, listen, I have an opportunity with this flatbed. You're like, no, we're not going to do that. We focus on this niche. So I came across the same situation with somebody who thinks they want to be an agent. Goes, hey, I have an opportunity, but I can do dry van all day. I'm like, sorry, man, I don't do dry van. I'm flatbed. So I just want to be the specialist in flatbed. We want to definitely dominate this region, and we want to be known for the flatbed specialist, for Southeast Texas.
For sure. Jack of all trades, master of none is not the way to become successful as a freight broker startup. Start with one niche, become proficient, develop that niche out, build a carrier database, build a reputation, understand the rates, start delivering at a high level of service. And then if you want to expand into another niche strategically, absolutely go ahead, do that. We had lots of niches that we grew over the time that I had my freight brokerage, but it all started with one. So we became the de facto expert in that niche, and it served us well. We did over $1 million in revenue our first year, and $3 million the second year, and $6 million. Right. And you guys know the whole story. So I look forward to that story with Elio. And just, a couple things to take away from what he said before we dive into Q&A. And that is, we talked about the niche thing. I think that's super important. The other thing you said when you talked about that cold call, how there's a lot of large companies out there, whether that be C.H. Robinson or Total Quality Logistics or TQL or XPO or all these large conglomerates. You have to find the advantage that you have over them. And the advantage to that is what I call big fish, small pond, or small fish, big pond, right? So as a shipper, as a customer, and this is just a little bit of a sales strategy for you, as a customer of a freight broker, would you rather be a small fish in a big pond or a big fish in a small pond? With those large companies, they're small fish in a big pond, particularly if they don't have over $5 or $10 million worth of freight spend per year. So you're a small fish in a big pond. You're not going to get their best resources. You're not going to get their best team. You're not going to get their best rates. You're not going to get their best trucks. You're just not going to get their best. But to me, Mr. Shipper, you're a big fish in a small pond. Yeah, we're small, but that's okay. That's going to allow me to spend a lot more time. You're going to get the absolute best out of us versus secondhand with someone who's large. And that's just a simple differentiation, right? The service is the same. We're going to use the same trucks. And we're going to use the same trucks. The rates are all going to be fairly comparable within probably $50 per load, right? And so the thing is you have to look at the strengths that you have. And sometimes being small is one of the biggest benefits you can have. So, I mean, I could continue to comment. I mean, Elio had made up some really good points. Totally appreciate you being here on the interview. I think it's very inspiring. I'm so excited to hear the progress from your wife and everybody that's involved in the business. It's going to become this family venture. And I'm sure we're going to stay in touch with all that. But before we dive into Q&A, if you are listening to this, if you're brand new or you've been listening and you're on the fence debating on whether you want to become a freight broker, Elio said it. It's not a get rich quick scheme. It's something where you do have to do the work. But I've put together a course called Freight Broker Bootcamp. Had that course for over 10 years, have trained well over 8,000 students, and we have a 60-day, 100% money back guarantee, ironclad. You don't even have to give us a reason why you don't want to continue with it. We'll give you your money back if it's within the first 60 days. So you literally have zero risk, okay? So if you're curious about becoming a freight broker, freight agent, check that out at freightbrokerbootcamp.com. So